Hi, Sharon. Thanks for joining me today. And I'm so glad to have you here with me because I read your bio and I'm quite impressed with your work. Tell us about yourself, what you do, your family heritage, how long you've been in Canada, and where you're from.
My name is Sharon Njobo, and my life begins in Zimbabwe, where I am born and raised. And I was raised by my grandmother, and I was one of many cousins in my grandmother's home. My grandmother was widowed when I was 12, so she single-handedly raised me and my cousins. She had about 3 years of education. She was a local fruits vendor, but she grew her business um, to become a restaurant in quotation marks, in a little town outside of one of the major cities in Zimbabwe. So from that early age, growing up with my cousins and also watching how my grandmother carried herself, I learned to be creative. I learned to be a problem solver. And I watched how my grandmother sacrificed and took me to a school that was outside of the township where we lived. And by the standards then, it was a very good school. And I had to take two buses to get there. Um, it was a better resourced school. And I think that sacrifice she made was a differentiator in terms of how things worked out for me. And then from those unresolved issues on my journalism career, which came back to haunt me and my family, we moved to the United States, could not regularize our stay. And then we inquired about moving to Canada. And in May of 2005, my family and I, with just suitcases, moved to this land of Canada. And that's where we settled in the Greater Toronto area. So, yeah, my son is 22, a graduate of McGill University. And my baby is 16, and we are truly excited to be here. And I love working with women. But I think this is a great point to stop, and then we can take a deeper dive in any of the areas where you'd like us to go.
In your journey so far in North America, especially Canada, what were some constraints and some victories you experienced along the way as an African woman?
The biggest constraint arriving in North America was the realization that I was moving in, because as a journalist in Zimbabwe, I was one of the journalists that traveled and covered state events. So I traveled internationally with the then head of state, President Mugabe, traveling internationally with him. And then I suddenly found myself sleeping on the floor of the living room of my young brother in Dallas, Texas. Such is life. And then coming to Canada and living at the shelter and having really to start not from zero, but starting from minus. And on that journey, is particularly when I was in America, one of the things that I did to blend in and not really stick out, I played dumb. And when I came to Canada and I had regularized my stay, one of the challenges was to remind myself that I was in a safe space. I did not have to act dumb or to play dumb and live under the radar, that it was okay for me to come out in my fullness and contribute. So it took me a few years, and thankfully, there are settlement programs that I took full advantage of. And I got a lot of help with resume writing and the job search. And just having access to knock on doors. So now digging into my journalism background and being comfortable asking questions and seeking information, that has served me well. And again, as a cousin among many, I found myself becoming a resource as well for the Zimbabwean community here in Canada. Whenever I had access to information, whenever I had knowledge about programs, I am ready to share. And naturally, I found myself being placed in a position where people would ask me questions. How does this go? Where can I find this? Where can I find that? And after a while of trying to run away from that, I realized that it was time I embraced it and then organized how I could share information. So one of those steps was to set up a Facebook group for women, so we can have that platform to share information, share encouragement in terms of what's going on back home, and the opportunities that are ongoing here in Canada, and just have a community of sisterhood where we can support each other, commiserate together, and celebrate together.
You mentioned earlier that in the States you had to play dumb, and I'm wondering what that's about.
I had to dim my light because, first of all, I was in a new country. I had been to the States actually as a part of the presidential delegation, moving in cars and not lining up at airports and being ushered through, right, the red carpet. And then suddenly, like I said, I was sleeping on my brother's living room on a mattress. And my first job working in the United States was in a call center where I was doing collections, right? And I am one person that processes information very quickly. And I could tell that the some of the people around me did not have as much exposure or did not process information as quickly as I do. And I felt it was not good for me to appear to be more intelligent than the leaders and the managers. So I had to pretend that, oh, I don't know this, and I would marvel at some of the things that I saw. And unknowingly, that then became who I was, where maybe at some point I was no longer acting it, but I had blended in and integrated, and I no longer interrogated issues or analyzed things or really was intentional with trying to find problems where you'd ask the supervisor everything, right? Because that's what everyone around me was doing. Supervisor, supervisor. So I would do the same as well. And also, I didn't want people to know who I was, and I didn't want people to know my story because I was not comfortable at that time to share my story.
That is so true. I think now I understand. I can relate on some level. So, on that note, what is your opinion on what's like to be an African woman globally here in Canada and also back home in Africa? So that would be Zimbabwe for you. What's it like?
You know, that's a very interesting question. Growing up in my grandmother's house, I really didn't know that I was a girl because the way duties were given in my grandmother's household, it was based on age. So if you were this age, you were responsible for this. If you're this age, you were responsible for this. And then when I went into journalism as a woman, that's when it hit me that I was a woman, because that was my first encounter experiencing sexual discrimination. That was my first encounter recognizing that I was being treated differently because I was a woman. And I really didn't know that I was a Black woman until I moved to North America,
Yes.
where that was so much pronounced, and the discrimination was not only on being a woman, but also being a Black woman. Being a Black woman from Africa, being a Black woman who has an accent. So that was always, you try to strike a conversation, and the first thing that people go to is your accent. So
Yep.
all those things have been gradually building up
Mhm.
um, on my journey. And I find that I've heard many times to challenge the system, whether as a mother, the very first time, one of the memories that I have was I had put my son in a private school, in a private Christian school in Toronto. Um, so this is also in part because of the sacrifices I saw my grandmother make, and I knew what a difference quality education makes in one's future. So I put my son in a Christian private school in Toronto, and within a couple of weeks, I picked him up. I remember vividly, it was a Friday of a long weekend. I picked him up from school, and he was looking lethargic, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I'm hungry. You forgot to pick me a lunch." And I said, "Well, but the school said if we don't pick you a lunch, they provide and they bill." Said, "Did you tell teacher?" And she said, "Yes, I told teacher." "What did she say?" She said, "Go back and sit down at your desk." I was livid. I
I'm
was
sure.
mad.
I'm sure.
And it was a
Sure.
long weekend. I could not call anybody. So finally, the Tuesday came and I called the school and I said, "This is what happened." And I'm speaking with the principal. And she says to me, "Oh, I think it's a language issue. I think it's communication." Because I feel that she judged me based on my son's first name, my son's
Yes.
last name, my son's immigration status. We were refugees at that time, and my accent. And she assumed, and she didn't realize that my son was actually raised in the United States, where we had lived for 5 years prior to coming here. So I said to her, I would like you to speak to the teacher and to speak to my son and then come back to me. And she came back and she said, "I am so sorry.
Mm,
I spoke with your son,
mm.
and it's not a communication issue. Your son is very articulate." And I say this with the greatest of pride. Yes, my son is an excellent communicator. And but what if we had just come from Africa and there was that language barrier,
Mhm, mhm.
which would have validated that
Yeah,
argument, which was unfounded? My son was just treated cruelly by the teacher.
based on
How do
perception.
you send exactly a 6-year-old boy back to his desk and teach him hours after that when you know he has not eaten?
Mhm, mhm.
So those are some of the experiences that I came across as as a woman and as an immigrant mother, where I found myself consistently having to advocate for my children, having to fight
Mhm.
for my children. And one of the ways I do that is I participate in the school leadership, whether it's joining the school board, and I'm
Yes.
there and I'm calling out um, situations. And it shouldn't be, though, but a lot of the discrimination, a lot of the racism is very much systemic, and it's
Mhm.
institutionalized. And you have to be in a community that is supportive. And I'm thankful that I had that community. We have a Zimbabwean church where I'm able to meet a lot of Zimbabweans, and you can vent, and some will
Exactly.
give you some pointers, and then you can pray and things like that. And I remember one time they said, "Oh, we don't want your daughter because she's not potty trained." And one sister went, "Oh, she's talking, but she's still not potty trained." We made her sit on the bathroom for 30 minutes and she still didn't go. So I told my friends and I said, "This is what happened to my daughter." And she was a nurse. And she said, "You have to go back and tell the daycare that there is no connection between bowel movement and speech, and they can't disqualify or discriminate my daughter because She's not potty trained, but she can speak. And I've actually found that it's that silenced her somehow. She really didn't regain her voice until about age 3, which are some of the challenges that we face as immigrant women. I'm thankful for the childcare subsidy, but we really didn't have time to help our children settle into the system because when we arrived, my daughter was only 5 months old. But our caseworker from Ontario Works was pushing that you need to get a job. You have good qualifications. You need to get a job and get off social assistance. So those are some of the unique challenges that we face when you come with a newborn and you are not eligible for mat leave or any type of parental leave. And you also asked about opportunities. I found that when you fight, the opportunities you when you have to fight for them, but the opportunities exist. Right? The information is there, but you have to. Sometimes it's like digging through a haystack to find that needle. Um, yeah, so the opportunities exist, but you have to dedicate time, which often we don't have as immigrants, as women, because we are so busy in the household, double shifts, and also being a friend to my mom who is old and lonely. And I'm her best friend, and she'll call me and tell me that, oh, Mama so and so from next door did this to me, and oh, this is what happened. So and so's child is getting married, and she wants to spend 30 minutes telling me about some of the things that trouble her and some of the things that excite her. So it's yeah, challenges and opportunities coexisting.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Many will benefit from hearing it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now, the pandemic and the death of George Floyd changed our world drastically. And I still recall the first time I saw the video. I recall that vividly. I was in my kitchen and my son came up to me and said, Mom, have you seen this video? And from his voice and the look on his face, I knew that whatever he was going to show me that day wasn't a good thing. So I said, what video? Then he handed me his phone. And I recall looking at the video and suddenly my heart just started racing. My heartbeat was fast. And I remember looking for a place to sit down. And because I was terrified, my first impression, my first reaction was fear. It wasn't even anger, like most people would say, oh, anger. Mine wasn't anger, mine was fear. And I guess that's how I respond to violence, because that was my reaction to when the Muslim family in Ontario, when they were killed, that was the same reaction. Like I almost feel like I'm going to pass out. And then I remember the thought that popped right into my head was a line from Man's Search for Meaning, a book by Viktor Frankl. And so we read it together as a family last year, just to process some of the challenges happening last year. And in his book, one of the most powerful statements for me in that book was what he said. He said, and I'm going to quote him, he said, since Auschwitz, we know what man is capable of. And since Hiroshima, we know what is at stake. So when I saw that video, I said to myself, this is what humankind is capable of. And what's at stake? Because at some point, I felt hopeless. But I also want to believe that no matter how terrible our world is, we all have a part to play. We shouldn't give up. We shouldn't sit back and let evil prevail. We should do our best. And that's what you're doing. That's what I'm trying to do here as well. So my question, sorry, in all of that rambling, my question to you is, what was your first reaction when you saw the George Floyd video?
Wow. Disbelief. Because every time when we hear of the brutality that is perpetrated against Black men, particularly, there is always hope. You know, they say hope springs eternal. I'm always hopeful that there won't be a next time. And as a mother of a young Black male,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
that is what keeps me saying the hope that the next day will be different, that there will be justice, particularly on the part of the perpetrator, that justice will be served, right? So I was in shock, I was in disbelief that this could not have happened. And to see also the magnitude of the cruelty despite the pleas of
Mhm.
everybody
Yeah.
around.
Yes.
And you see also the power dynamics at play. And I see also the fear that, given the people who were around, surely someone could have stepped forward and pushed the officer
Intervene.
off
Yes.
of
Yes.
George Floyd, but fear held people back.
Mhm.
And it's sad that we are still at that place where this continues to happen. And when that continues to happen, healing becomes impossible. And in the absence of healing, there's a lot of trauma that we carry forward. And on the part of Black youth, I also see anger, which then perpetuates these things. And that's my worst fear, especially when my son started driving. And I'm always fearful that.
Same here.
Uh,
Same here.
so we have to have this conversation with our sons only because they're Black.
Yes.
Their white peers don't need to have this conversation. And at times, I'm sure as a mother, you will agree that there have been times when, not because you don't trust your son, but sometimes you have this intuition that, oh gosh, I feel like something wrong is going to happen today. Your
Mhm.
son comes and says, can I go there? And you're like, no.
Exactly. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And just
Yep.
because you have this premonition, which,
Yep.
yeah, other races don't have that. It's unfair, right? That's the equity, that's the difficult part that even we start to see it too with the Asian hate. And in our own backyard in Canada, we have our very filthy history with the First Nations, right? Where more recently there's been the discovery of bodies of children, innocent children who did not deserve to die, but the only
Mhm.
reason why they died was because of who they are, how they sound, and
Mhm.
how they look.
Yeah.
And sadly, I don't see a change in the near future. Like I said,
Oh,
that in the absence of healing, in the absence of, and healing can't happen when there is no change. So we really do need to see meaningful change. And as women across all races, we are the nurturers. We are the ones that have that responsibility of raising our children. That I would say, as women, we carry the burden
oh,
of raising our children, girls and boys,
yes.
Black and white, Asian and indigenous, that we do so and raise kind children. We raise compassionate children. We raise children who are respectful, all those things. We have a name for that in Southern Africa, Ubuntu. That a Christian, we talk about treat others exactly as how you'd like to be treated by them. So just going back to those basic things and being compassionate and recognizing how our actions or lack of actions are contributing to the perpetuation of this systemic racism, of the hate, of the needless loss of lives that we see around us.
Yes, certainly. Yes, we all have a part to play. We all have a part to
Indeed,
play.
yes. Mhm.
What should we all be doing? Because we're all responsible one way or the other. What should we do differently? How should change come?
I would say the first thing really is to inform yourself and be knowledgeable, because many times um, the defense that I hear is that of ignorance. And we know at law, ignorance is no defense. So taking responsibility to learn and understand what the issues are. What are the issues that concern your neighbors, right? What are the issues that concern the people of color, the issues that concern Black people, the issues that lead to discrimination for people of Asian descent, for the First Nations and Indigenous peoples of this land. We have to be knowledgeable. I find that for myself, really, I did not have much knowledge on the indigenous peoples of this land. And it was until I took the trouble to read up about it and to understand the history and to also take an interest in what is going on.
Mhm.
That's when I realized that there are many of us who are wounded, but ignorance is preventing us from uniting and speaking with one voice and understanding that we are all wounded. Sadly, at times we end up with this comparison that whose pain is more painful, whose pain ought to take priority. So I would say the one thing really is let's get knowledgeable. It is not enough for our white neighbors, our white colleagues to not understand what Black racism looks like and how it manifests. And it is not enough to say, I have a Black friend or my cousin is married to a Chinese. It's not enough. We need to go deeper because we have much higher literacy levels. So we are able to research, read, and understand. And only then can we start to apply and to hold other people accountable. And also, there's the issue of privilege. Even as a Black immigrant woman, there are instances where I am in a position of privilege, I am in a position of power. Do I acknowledge those situations and how do I handle those situations? Uh, do I, for example, I'm a Christian, I can dress however I want and go to the airport and no one will give me a second glance with my necklace with a cross on it, my religious regalia. But when a Muslim comes through in their religious regalia, they get the second, third, or fourth look. But what am I doing to champion the right, to protect and defend the rights of someone who believes differently from me? We have the rights of the gay, lesbians, queer, transgender, right? Um, what do I do when I hear someone who is with me speak ill of them?
Yes.
Do I respect and protect their beliefs? So it is for me, I came to this point by really seeking knowledge and understanding that rights are universal. And once we understand the universality of rights, we then know that it is not about sameness, that we don't have to believe the same things. We don't have to have the same choices, whether you're pro choice or pro life. You have a right to that belief.
Certainly a great way to look at things. And I like what you said about being up to speed, reading, not staying ignorant, being knowledgeable about things, where you are, your environment. As the founder of 263 True North, what was the inspiration behind that? And why the name 263 True North?
Okay. So that's a topic that I'm very passionate about.
That's why I left it till almost the end. So,
Yeah, so we
no,
have time to talk about the other things, right?
yes.
Okay. So 263 is the phone code for Zimbabwe. And
Oh, I'm ignorant in America.
you've been schooled. Yeah. So 263 is the phone code for Zimbabwe. And then True North, of course, it's Canada. So 263 is a community of Zimbabwean women now living in Canada. And I shared earlier how I was spending quite a bit of time responding to inquiries from people on information and stuff like that. And I thought, hey, technology allows for broadcast, right, of this information. You send one message, it's received by multiple people. So I created this private Facebook group for Zimbabwean women, where we say we want to lead, we want to lean in, we want to learn from each other, and we talk about anything and everything. um, we talk about some of the taboo topics, and more recently, we've been talking about what does it mean for us to grow and mature as a community. And that has led us to even picking up some of the traumatic events in our past as Zimbabweans that divide us as a nation, and seeking to understand what really led us there, and having some of those difficult conversations. They don't lead to consensus, but what I like about those conversations is it says to everyone participating, it is safe for you to hold an opinion around this. So that is the spirit behind 263 True North. And by making it a safe space and trusted virtual relationships, many of us have never met. We have built from that some economic initiatives where we have grocery clubs. We collect money here as a group, and then we buy in bulk in Zimbabwe, because our economy in Zimbabwe is characterized by shortages of products and skyrocketing prices. But by coming together, we are able to buy from wholesalers and negotiate some terms where we can buy incrementally, and then they can distribute to our families back home. And here in Canada, a couple of the women, or close to 100 of us, have come together, incorporated a company, and we're investing in real estate. And there's lots of things. So we're starting to subgroup. There are women also who are supporting each other with mining projects. Recently, there was a group that was started to buy plants for back home in Zimbabwe. If you have property, you wanted plants. I love your plant there, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
So we got together and we bought plants. So we do what could appear to be little things, and yet they're so meaningful for us as women. They edify us, they help us to support, to fulfill our dual role, right? As children, as the rich cousins in the family, then we can do that without breaking the bank. And we also have tough conversations around Black tax where we can rein each other back and be like, no, you don't have to work so hard. We talk about self-care. So I really love the Twisted Spirit True North. And out of it, we can pour into each other. And the women have poured into me in many, many, many ways. I've developed some very strong relationships, and with the encouragement and the learning that comes from different people who come on our platform. I've actually started a company because one of the things that we learned was if you're going to do a company, you have to incorporate, you have to formalize, right? So I started a new company called the Fire Starter, and the purpose.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I'm continuing to work with women and harnessing our capital as women, human capital, our skill capital, and our financial capital to do things in a big way and to make our presence felt in the local economy where we are here in Canada, and also to harness it as well as the diaspora community of women to invest and to contribute towards development in Zimbabwe.
Wow, what an amazing story. You're such an inspiration. And can I join? Even though I'm not from Zimbabwe.
We can adopt you.
Exactly, adopt me, please.
Yeah, like stay home. But this is something that can be replicated, of course. And
I know, yes,
yes.
I know, yes. Well, what a neat model. What a great idea. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You are welcome.
And now I'd like to explore the idea of the ideal African woman with you. Do you think there's an ideal African woman?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
And it's so for my son, he has an ideal African woman, which might be different from my daughter, right? But
Yes.
then in terms of having this general African woman, I don't think that one exists. But
No.
at the individual level, even my own boss, he has his ideal African woman where he speaks to some of the characteristics of me as an African woman that edify the team, particularly now when we are so big on diversity, right? That when I come to the table, he doesn't want to hear himself speak through me. Rather, he wants the African woman. I work in international development.
Yes, I know that.
I do health projects. So he wants that ideal African woman to come through, right? And look at our interventions through that lens to say,
Yes.
when we do it this way, this is how it can potentially harm African women.
Yes.
And this is how we can mitigate. So there is an ideal African woman, and we should not minimize or diminish. We have to show up in our Africanness, whether it's me and my ability to speak things as they are with my loud laugh. So everybody knows that I'm happy.
Exactly.
Yes. And yeah, so then there's also the stereotype, right? That African women are strong, that African women
angry.
yes, that we don't pull into work, right? That we are interrogated when we call in, but our colleagues are not subjected to the same interrogation because it's okay for them to have this, to be frail and to have these situations and emotions.
But African women.
Exactly. So there's pros and cons.
They're superwomen.
No, we are not superwomen. We are women, and in some cases we are strong, and in some cases we need a hug.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. You're so right about that. And that's why I conclude this very interesting. It's so hard to stop with you, Sharon, but we'll just go on and on and on. So I always conclude with this question: what do you do for self-care?
What do I do for self-care? I love to read. Um, and I love to play music, and I play it loud and I sing along even louder. And because I come from a large family, and I realize now that I'm older and I'm able to be mindful around what are the things that help me to relax. I find it's for me, it's actually solitude, just being
Yes,
alone.
you're an introvert, just like me.
That's where I draw my
Solitude,
energy.
it's
Yes.
very, very important to me. My son knew that right from the time he was 18 months. He's like,
Yeah.
Mommy, your me time. I'm like, yeah, my
Yes.
me time.
You
Solitude is
trained
very
me so well.
important. Yes.
Yeah, so I love just being alone and read a book. And sometimes I'm just sitting in the bathtub with water, Epsom salts. My daughter introduced me to bath bombs. And I love also spending time with my girlfriends, and we sit, chat, dance, and eat.